Once again, ladies and gentlemen, it's Lua time, or more specifically, it's Love2D time with Lua. And I'm here today, and we're gonna do I think we're gonna do some good work today because, hey, why should we do anything if it's not good, right? So I was, actually woke up last night in the middle of the night, and I was thinking about this StateMachine stuff, and I thought, you know what? There's a better way to do it. There's no need really to have to derive from this StateMachine, but instead we can just have this be its own class. Then we can utilize it as we see fit in any class without having to derive or basically inherit that module from the StateMachine module. And that gives us a couple of benefits, several actually. That way we can put several StateMachines in one module if we want to. We can mix and match, and really this doesn't need to be inherited from. So let me show you what I want to do here. So instead of deriving from the StateMachine here, our player class, I want to derive from just plain old class. If you remember, that's how we make a class, as we say class colon derive. And of course, in order to do that, I'm going to come over here and grab this class statement. I'm going to copy and paste. It's one of my friends, copy and paste. A great friend of mine. All right, so now we've got the class statement. We're going to need the StateMachine still, as I said. So now we are no longer a member of the StateMachine class. Now, we're just going to kind of give a idea of how I want this to work before we sort of rewrite some of this stuff. This may take some time, but we'll see what we can do. Whereas this episode, we don't need this state anymore because we know what state the player is going to be in initially whenever we new it up, and that's going to be the animation or the idle state. So what I want to do is I want to do the following. This is kind of how I'm thinking I may want it to work. I want to say self dot, let's call it the animation StateMachine. So we'll assign a variable to that, and we'll say StateMachine. And if you look at the constructor right now for StateMachine, it just says, hey, what state do you want to be in? But I think what I want to do is, well, I know what I want to do is, each StateMachine is going to be its own self-contained object, and it's just going to contain those pieces that it needs. So what I want to do is pass it what I'll call a state table, which really ends up being an instance of this, so that it can find the functions that we want to call, and it just calls it on this particular instance of this module or class. So then that would look like the following. So StateMachine, and then when I'm in player, of course, I want to pass it self, which is this player object. And then, of course, I want it to go to the init state, or the idle state. The idle state is where we want it to go. So that means we don't need this. That kind of gets rid of that. And then also, we're going to want to come down here to this update. We don't need self.super.update anymore. We're going to replace, I'd say we'll replace that with self.animation StateMachine colon update. Like that. And then we'll come over here, and you see we'll call this just like it is. And I think that looks good to me, but we're also going to have to come over here and change these change calls to our animation StateMachine. So we'll keep that change call, but instead of self change, it's going to be self.animation StateMachine colon change. See what I mean? Since we're going to be actually creating an instance of that StateMachine table or module, and then using it that way. Let's see. Do we have all the changes? I believe it is change. We may have to redo some of that too. We'll go to punch enter, and punch, and we've got self change, and That looks okay to me. So let's head back in here and see kind of what we want to do with this particular new state machine. I like the transition, this little transition table, and that way we can also, we'll of course we're going to keep this local because, like I said before, it's nicer just to encapsulate what we can. We'll go ahead and do the self:_reset here, and we want to add, let's do an assert, and we'll say that we want the type of the state table to be equal to a table, because that's what we want to pass in. Otherwise, there's not going to be any functions in it. Whatever it is, it's going to be a number or a string or something like that. We want a table. So we'll do an assert, and we'll say if it's false, then we'll come up with a message that says state table must be a table, and maybe a exclamation mark for additional emphasis. State table parameter. Oh, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, and really, we could come in here and say, I mean, if you want to be completely complete about it, we could say that as well. Parameter state. Let's do it this way. State parameter must be of type string or nil. Like that. So now when we reset it, we reset it, and we want to change to that start state. But what we probably want to do also is we definitely want to save this state table so that we can call the functions in it as our state changes, of course. So we'll do we'll just call it the state table. Same name as what we have, only it's in the self table. And we'll set that equal to state table. Now something else. Let's change this variable name to, I want it to be a little more clear than just state. Let's call it start state name. I want to indicate that that needs to be a string. And so anywhere I talk about state should be like that. So that's going to be the actual state name, a string. Okay. Let's look at the reset real quick. I think we may want to say and the way I want to do it is I don't want to store the previous actual function. I don't think we need that. We're going to store, and I'll set them equal to nil here because when we do a reset, it'll be, I want to store the current state name, and we're just resetting them to nil here. Self.previous name. So that's the previous state name, and then the current state name. We'll reset those, and we'll do all that magic here in a minute in the change method. And let's change this to let's change this to state name also. It just makes more sense. Not also, but we'll change state name, state name. It just feels more like it is what it's supposed to be. So we'll look at this real quick. So we'll say here, and we'll just make this clear, if we're already in the same state, just return, right? We might want to add an additional optional variable here that says force this state change to change to itself, but I don't know that that's really going to be necessary. So we're just going to do it like this. So what we want to do is, let's just think about this. And we kind of did this, and we broke this up into change immediate and change. And I think really we probably should do something like maybe add an immediate flag here so that we can just do true or false here, and then we can just pull all of this stuff into this just plain old change function. Get rid of the change immediate function. So that would mean that we would have something like on this change. We change it true. But really, that doesn't necessarily matter when you new it up because the previous state is going to be nil anyway. So we should really just be able to leave it off like that. So let's look at how we might grab all of this stuff and shove it into here. Okay. So what we want to do is let's block this out. What we want to do is we want to see first the first order of business. If it's not immediate, we want to see if the previous state has an exit function. So that would be, we'll just start this. If not immediate, then we want to, and plus an additional condition that we have not yet put in here. Then we want to do something here. And we then, see, we've got this change immediate. We will take this stuff. We'll do that after we do the state change. So I'm going to go ahead and put it at the end of this, and we'll say self dot, and we're going to do previous name equals self dot state name. So we're having that previous name set to the what we would say is the current state name, and then self dot state name equals that new state name. Make sense? I hope so. So we'll say store the previous state name and set the current one. Just like so. It's all this code in the middle that we haven't completely figured out how to do yet, right? Right. What we should have is some kind of function that says something like, because we're really doing, when we have these enters and exit, and then we have the what I would call the none transition or the state function itself, they're kind of transition functions. So I want to call this function set transition function. And that should take a state name as input and say a transition type. So what I want to, and what it should return is, so what I want this function to do is takes a state name and a transition type, and returns true if it is able to set the state to that state name and transition type. We'll say otherwise it returns false. So what we want in here is we want to, of course, assert that this state name needs to be the same as this up here. It needs to be either a string or nil, because we can set the transition, we can set the state name to nil if we want to, which would be like ending the state machine, and it should still work correctly. So let's do that. Parameter state name and state name and state name. So we'll assert that just because. And then the transition type is really going to need to be a string. Let's go ahead and assert that too. You don't have to do this, but if you have, if you leave this code for a time and then you come back and then you start trying to poke around and see, figure out what it does, these asserts, you can look at them and you can say, oh, the transition type has to be a string. Okay. Oh, the state name has to be a string or nil. Okay. Well, you can kind of reason a little bit more about what needs to be done. And let's change this around. I like it better like that. So let's say transition type parameter must be a string. Okay, so we got our asserts out of the way. We got our asserts out the way. You know what I'm talking about? So now we want to check and see if this state name, we want to see if it's nil, because if it's nil, we'll do an else because we'll do something else here. If it's nil, we just want to return false, and then I want to have and remember what I did up here, which is this right here. That's actually the function, a pointer to the function that we're going to be calling down here. So it'll look something like this. It'll say self.state dt self.state is that right? Yeah, self.state. Oh no. Self.state, and then it needs the reference to the self function, or the self table, which is that state table, right? And then the delta time. So that's going to be our new deal right there. And this chunk of code right here is going to be good. We're probably going to have to change all of this. Okay, so back up to here. So if the state name is nil, then we want to set the state function pointer, which is what that is, to nil, and we'll return false. We also want to do that if the self.state table, and then we'll say, because we're looking for that, remember what we're doing here, we're looking for that an entry by the name of state name, and then we'll concatenate the transition type to that, which should be the name of the function we're looking for. And if it's in the table, it'll show up. But if it's not in the table, this will be nil. Something else that we're not doing here, which you could do, is check, as we're doing right here, check that the type of object that this returns, if it doesn't return nil, check that it's a function. And if it's not, then you could error out too. But I'm not going to. We could do that. I don't know. Maybe we'll do that. That's something else you could do. Okay. So if it's not found, if the state name is nil, or if that state is not found, then we set the state to nil and we return false. Basically, we're saying we were unable to set that transition function. We were unable to set the transition function. Otherwise, self.state is we're gonna set it to that transition, or that function. And right here we could say assert type self.state equals function, and then we could say, what would we say here? We could say self.state name is not a, or must be a function. Let's see. Is this really a state? Something like that. Don't have to put that in there. It's optional, but it makes things a little safer. So we're adding it. Why not? And actually, we should do the following, which is self.state name before we assert. And then if our assert fails, we want that to be correct. So that's going to be state name, like that. Let's see, should we do the state name here? Why shouldn't we? What's wrong with that? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Something else we want to do. Let's do this instead. I don't know. Doesn't matter, but I'd rather have this up here. Let's also set, since I think that we'll just control the transition, the self dot transition. We'll control it here. Yeah, I think we'll control it here. Well, partially anyway. And then if we want to do some kind of debugging, we may want to do that here. Something like previous state. Then have it something like, we could do a previous state would be self dot state name, because remember we haven't actually, that should be up here, shouldn't it? And really we're doing that here. So let's not do this here. Let's just do this. So the set transition function doesn't change the state name. Okay, self.transition equals transition type, so we need to do that. And so then that means that the previous state is going to be still in self.stateName, because we'll call this before we do this, before we set these two. So because remember that state name is the new state. Maybe that's what we should call it here. That would make it more clear, wouldn't it? Say new state name, just for the fun of it. Okay, so that's the previous, and we put it in parentheses because if it's nil, we can say or just an empty string. Kind of nice. And we'll concatenate that with I don't know, current, and then we'll concatenate that with the same thing, which would be our new state name concatenated with self.transition. Actually, let's just do transition type. I mean, we have it. We don't have to do that self stuff. So this, or just an empty string. So that way we can just see what's going on here, hopefully. So there's our set transition function. So I'm thinking what we want to do first is we want to see if the previous state has an exit function. So this other condition here, so if it's not immediate, then we want to see if that previous state has an exit function. So we could say self set transition function, and we could say the current state, right? Which is self.stateName. That's the current state, which is what we want to see if it has an exit function. And then we want to say the transition function that we're looking for is the exit, or the transition that we're looking for is exit. Then, and the kind of the nice thing here is we don't have to do anything. We don't have to put anything here. So that just kind of works. And then we can go on to our next possibility, which would be we're going to set, so we'll do self.set transition function, and we're going to set, we want to set the state to the new state name. Let me do that here too. Let's make this, let's call this new state name. Yeah, let's say new state name, because I feel like it's a little more clear. Okay, so we want to try to set the transition function to the new state name, and we want to see if it has a transition.enter function, right? So that's that underscore enter. And if it does, then it's going to work. Otherwise, we could do else. We've basically said that function, or if it's if it gets to here, it's got to have just a plain old, the regular state function, which is the name of that state without any underscore enter or underscore exit to it. So then we can say, I'm going to grab this. Actually, I'm going to grab this whole thing, put it down here, and then we'll say transition none. And then there's the end. So we don't need this stuff because we've already done that, and we're not going to use the change immediate. So we're not going to use that. So see, we kind of replaced the change immediate sort of by this, I guess. It is still a member of the module. We could make it a local function, but then you'd have to pass in the table, the self table into it. But this will be fine. We just don't call this. We could put an underscore in it. You know, there's some conventions there, but we'll just leave it. So there's another way to do this too. I think we'll look at this. Well, let's try to get this to work first, and then we'll check that out. So I kind of put that debug stuff into the set transition function. So now we want to do this stuff. So if the transition is transition.exit, then we want to call the current state function. And then we'll try to set, once again, we'll try to do this stuff right here, because we want to try to set that self. It's not going to be new state. Well, I'll show you. Let me show you. The transition exit, and then we're going to get rid of this stuff. So we've exited. It says the transition is the exit transition, so we're going to call it on the current, that current state function. And then we will want to change based on if that new state, or remember we've changed that here, so that self.new, the new state basically, if that has an enter transition function, then set that up. Otherwise, it's got to have a normal non-transition function. So we'll try it like that. And like I said, when we get this to work, I've got a couple of other thoughts about how we can make this a little bit less weird, because it almost looks like there's empty conditionals here. You know, there's nothing. We're not doing anything here, so it looks a little bit weird. We'll tackle that maybe here in a minute, if we get this to work, that is. So otherwise, so if the transition is an exit transition, then we do this. Otherwise, if it is an enter transition, then we still want to call that, basically get that enter transition in there. And then we want to try to set, right? We want to try to set it to that none transition function, which should work. And then all that stuff should go away. I know, that's a lot. Let's see what happens. I'm going to run it. Cross your fingers. Ooh, does he punch? Ooh, he punches. Wow, okay. Awesome. Looks like that was working. Let me enable debug just so we can see what's going on, just to make sure that things are on the up and up here. So I'll drag that window over here so we can see what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to press the space bar. Uh-oh, I see where I forgot a space there. Do a rerun here. Okay. Now, so the current is idle. So when I press the space bar, the previous was idle, the current is punch enter. Then it calls punch enter, then it leaves punch enter. Previous was punch, of course, and the current is punch. So really, it doesn't have that transition. It'd be interesting to be able to print that, actually. But we should be able to do that, right? We should be able to do this, and then we could do this. Yes, and because we'll change it after the fact. Let's see what that looks like. That should. Oh. we need to do no, that's none. I'm getting an error. Let me show you. See, attempt to concatenate field state name, a nil value. That's in 41. That's strange because all I did was change that. Let's see if that runs. Moving that down may have changed things. No, it didn't change things. Because self.transition, I'm setting it here when we do a reset. But it doesn't like that. It's obviously a nil value. We could do this. Just stick this over here and do the same thing for this one. See if that works. Okay, that came up. Let's see if it looks right. We'll punch. No, that didn't work. I think I'm changing it somewhere else. I'll leave it like this for now. But the transition is here, and really that's the only place we're changing that transition is in this function. So I like that. I think that's great. That's the only place we're changing that transition. And really, I think this is the only place that we're doing the actual change. So I like that. I'll leave that for here for now. Now, to check out this, what I'm thinking is I'm guessing, sort of, that we can maybe say that so not immediate and self.set transition. No, we can't do that, can we? I want to let me do that. What we really want to do is just set up a not or an and an or kind of thing that goes on here. So it would be or. This would be or. This would be or. Like that. So what if I let go of that and then we got rid of this? Unexpected keyword not near immediate. Really? Okay. Okay, let's just do it this way. Double equals. Yes? Really? I think it would be nice to do it this way. Unexpected symbol near self. That's the same one. I may work on that a little bit later. That's what I want to do, is just do it that way. It seems like that would be more clear because we can do it that way. We can do that. We should be able to do that here. Do I have an enter function in here? Okay, so we should be able to test that. We could do, I think, this, and then we could do or. Will it let me do that? Because it is returning a value. Or do I have to put it all in one line? Well, really I don't have to assign that to any kind of variable. Yeah, lets me do that, but I don't want to assign it to a variable. I just want it to run one or the other. Okay, it doesn't matter. We can leave it like this because it's working. But it's just a little weird looking since we have these empty conditionals. because I really don't want to do anything. All I want to do is, if this works, then we're done. Otherwise, if this works, then we're done. Nothing. Call that function. Same for this stuff up here. I may look into that some more, but in any case, I think we have everything filtered out like we want it. I would be interested to know why this print statement, the self.transition, shouldn't that have something in the way of a value? I'm just really curious, ladies and gentlemen, why that's not working, so you have to pardon me. Yeah, see, there it is. So it's got previous, and just enter. Really? Was it enter? Idle enter. And then idle. Idle. So there's a let me just do this to be more clear. You're getting confused about my previous, nothing, and then you have idle enter is the current, which is the new transition. Self.transition. Maybe we should do this then, and perhaps that is the issue, which is we're not getting, let's say transition dot none here. None. So because there really isn't any transition when the state's nil. Punch. Does that change anything? Idle current. Yeah, I think it may. I think it may, but it probably is not going to let us do this, is it? No, it does not. Well, state name is not going to work. State name or nothing. Self-transition or nothing. That self.transition should always have a value in it. Oh, hold on. Hold on, ladies and gentlemen, we might have fixed it, yeah? No. No, we haven't. Oh. Of course. I think we need that, and we need to remove this. How about that? I know this isn't very important, but I want it to work right. Punch, enter, current, punch. Yes. Previous punch, current, idle, enter. Idle, enter, previous, idle, enter, current. That's it. We've got it, ladies and gentlemen. It works. It works like a charm. We just had our little ors and parentheses in the wrong place. Our parens. There we go. Boom. Okay. So that's nice to have as a debug tool. I'll comment it out here so that we don't have to see that stuff all the time. I'll turn off debug just so it's disabled. Let's check and let's take a look at our code here and see if there's anything else that we may want to change or make better besides these. Besides these functions right here. It just feels weird to do that, but it does work. It's all good. It's all fine. I think that'll work for today. We are almost at 40 minutes. I'll tell you what, we've had a lot of fun today, haven't we? I think the StateMachine model works a lot better. I think that we never did really need to do that derivation and have this be a member of the state machine. So it's all encapsulated, and you just give it a table that has your stuff in it, and you call update on it, and it does the calls as it needs. With that, I'll leave you to it. Thanks for watching.